Good morning, everyone. Hope your Yom Kippur went well. You should all have a good Yar Shana Tova. Okay, Perek Yud, Mishna Yud. Chapter 10, Mishnah 10. All vegetables that are pickled together are permissible. Meaning, if you have one vegetable that is truma and the other vegetable that is not truma, and they were pickled together, they're fine. Nothing happens. The chulin vegetable remains permissible. Ela imachasis. The exception is, though, if let's say the truma was called chasis. Chasis are, the art scroll calls it a pungent bulb, a sharp bulb, which means this family of herbs called chasis or chasios includes garlic, onions, leek. These are all plants whose bulbs do not decompose when planted. And because of their exceptional sharpness, these species transmit their flavor to the vegetables with which they are pickled. So therefore, as we're going to see, that if the truma is chasis, and that's pickled with a chulin vegetable, then the chulin vegetable will now become forbidden to a non-kohen because it's meduma, because it's a mixture of the chulin vegetable with the flavor, with the taste of the truma chasis vegetable. So now the Mishnah elaborates. Chasis shel chulin and chasis shel truma. If you have a chasis, meaning again that species of plants, that's chulin, together with chasis, plants that are truma, or yarek shel chulin, or a vegetable of chulin, in chasis shel truma, with the chasis of truma, asar, it's going to be forbidden. Point being that as long as the chasis is the truma, makes no difference what the chulin is. The truma chasis will, through pickling, the chasis will transfer flavor into the vegetable, which will absorb it. So whether the vegetable is itself, whether the chulin vegetable itself is from the chasis family, which maybe because of its sharpness makes it more susceptible for absorbing, the point is it doesn't. Whether it makes it more susceptible to absorbing, or talking about a regular vegetable that's not sharp, makes no difference. If the chasis vegetable is truma, and we're talking and it's being pickled together with the truma vegetable, no matter what the truma vegetable may be, the truma vegetable will become forbidden because it will absorb flavor from the chasis, that very sharp tasting bulb plant. However, chasis shel chulin and yarek shel truma muter. But if we're talking about the chasis is chulin, but the vegetable is truma, then it's be permissible. The vegetable being truma, it's a regular vegetable. It's not chasis, doesn't have a sharp flavor. It's not sharp, it doesn't have a sharp flavor. And therefore, through pickling, it will not transfer its flavor from it into the chulin vegetable, even though the chulin vegetable is a chasis vegetable. Because at the end of the day, the question is not so much the absorption of the chasis vegetable as much as the fact that it gives out a sharp flavor. And therefore, if the truma vegetable is the sharp one, the chasis, the sharp bulb one, so then we say that it gives out flavor, and through the pickling process, it will now be absorbed into the other vegetable, no matter what it may be. But the other way around, doesn't happen. If the truma vegetable is a regular vegetable, through pickling, its flavor will not be transferred into the chulin vegetable. Okay, and we did already mention this point before, but although there is a rule of kavush u'mavushal, that when you pickle something, it's like cooking it, and there's no question that if you took the two vegetables, let's say not even chasis, truma vegetable, not in a chulin vegetable, and you cook them together, the flavor would definitely be transferred into the chulin, and it'll become forbidden. But as we mentioned previously, even though there is a rule, kavish to mavushal, kavish is like cooking, When it comes to truma, it's not always going to be that way. We had that case by the olives before, and now we have it here. Truma flavor, the transfer truma flavor works differently, and therefore, under the circumstance like our Mishnah, that even though you're pickling, but we're talking about truma, and we're talking about, let's say, and we're talking about the case of the vegetable that's truma is not a chassis. It's not going to be transferred through pickling. That's the rule when it comes to truma. Works differently than other things. And other prohibitions, it wouldn't be that way. If we're dealing with other prohibitions, pickling would be like cooking, and that would be it. But for truma, for whatever reason, the sages had a tradition that truma transfer, the flavor of truma, the principles of the transfer of truma flavor works differently. And in certain circumstances, it's not going to happen through pickling. And therefore, in our case of the Mishnah, we're talking about vegetables, regular vegetables. There will not be a transfer through pickling. And the only time there will be a transfer is if we're talking about the truma vegetable is a chassis type, and then it will, through pickling, be able to transfer flavor from it into the other vegetable, whatever vegetable it may be, to make it medum and to make it forbidden. The Torah prohibits someone who is impure. You come into contact with something that makes you tamei. We call that, we translate as ritually impure, but it means impure. The Torah considers you impure. That person is not allowed to enter the Levite camp, which is the Harabayis. When the Jewish people were in the desert, there were three camps. There was the Machna Shechina, the camp of the divine presence. That's where the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was. Around that, the Levium, the Levites camp, that was called the Machna Levia, the Levite encampment. And then you had the Machna Yisrael, the Israelite encampment of everybody else around. And the Torah says that someone who is impure may not enter the Machna Levia, may not enter the Levite camp. Shenemar, as it states, a person will not be pure. And in that context, it's talking about a person who is not pure from a seminal emission. He is allowed to come into the camp. The Kibbutz Chazal and our sages have a tradition, Shumach Levia. The Torah is referring to the Levite camp. V'arabayis. Now, the Levite camp translated into the more contemporary situation. The Jewish people, where they settled in Eretz Yisrael, didn't have that same setup. But the setup in the Beis HaMikdash was that the equivalent to the Levite camp was a Temple Mount. Once you entered the courtyard, you're already in the Machna Shechina, already to the equivalent of the encampment of the divine presence. That was the area of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple itself. The Temple Mount, that already was considered, that was the equivalent to the Levite camp. And therefore, translated into a more contemporary situation, someone who is impure cannot enter the Temple Mount. Someone who is impure, who enters the Temple Mount, transgresses this. This applies also nowadays, says the Chavetz Chaim, both for men and women, because we all are considered tamei through contact with a dead body. If you ever gone to a funeral, we consider you're for sure contact through a dead body. But also there's the problem of graves that we don't know where they are, and therefore we all assume that we are tamei, that we are impure, the impurity that comes from a dead body. And therefore, for sure, that person cannot enter the Machna Levia, cannot enter the encampment of the Levites, which would be, its equivalent is the Temple Mount. Mitzvahs leisash l'shkoyach ma'aseh Amalek. Prohibition against forgetting what Amalek did to us. Shenamar, as it states, Zachar asher l'cha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did, the first nation to attack you after leaving Egypt. Loi tishkach, you cannot forget. You may not forget. V'hainu b'leiv, and that means in one's heart. She'as l'shakech yivatzav v'sinasi b'menu. One is not allowed to forget the hatred, or rather, his hatred towards us. Okay, one's not allowed to forget. One has to always bear that in mind. One can't just forget it. One's not allowed to cause that to be forgotten. kind of just, forget about Amalek. Amalek is done. It doesn't matter what he did. Now to do that. This applies in all places at all times, both by men and by women. Now, at this point, the Chavetz Chaim writes, Tamu kol ha-mitzvos leisaseh shimanu ha'adam bizman hazeh la'aseisam. With this, we complete the list of the prohibitions that a person has to refrain from doing nowadays. And their number comes out to 194. So the Chavetz Chaim wrote this book in order for people to review it and to be familiar and fluent in the commandments that are relevant nowadays. So actually, at this point, we have completed going through all the mitzvahs. The first section was the positive commandments. The second section is the negative commandments. And we've actually completed the work that the Chavetz Chaim did. What we will do is that in this print is a supplement. And it's a supplement of the mitzvahs that are relevant in Eretz Yisrael only. The Chavetz Chaim didn't include it because apparently he wanted this book to be relevant to Jews all over the world. And therefore, he didn't include it. But those who put this out in Eretz Yisrael, with the agreement of leading rabbis in Eretz Yisrael, decided to add to it the mitzvahs that are relevant to Eretz Yisrael, and that will be the section that we will begin in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.